why isn't gaming fun anymore? I think for a lot of people, it's you're no longer a kid. You know what I mean? Like hanging out. It's the same thing. Like hanging out with your friends was much funner as a kid than it is as an adult. Even though not much has changed, and in fact, it's even better because now that you have your own money, like your own car, you literally go where you want and just do what you want most times. Obviously, like you can't like if you're not a millionaire, you're not just buying yachts and stuff, but like the things you wanted to do as a kid, you can easily do as an adult, and yet it's not as fun. I think that's just life in general. Just isn't as fun as you grow older. I would, I'm guessing.
Listen, guys, here's the thing.
And of course, this is by the pie face.
I'm old. I have gray hairs. But there's one thing that's been in my life since my hair was short and full of color, and that's video games. But recently, I've realized that I spend a lot more time consuming content about video games than I do actually playing video games. In fact, in the past couple of years, there's been months
I don't. I definitely play them more than I watch content on them.
at a time where I did not play a single
I'll do
minute
usually
of video
both
games.
at the same time,
And it
to be
most
fair.
certainly is not because I'm a busy and accomplished adult with a roaring career and social life, because quite the opposite. My life mostly revolves around watching YouTube videos, streams, and shows, but I actively miss playing video games and spending countless hours immersing myself in creative worlds and game systems, and it seems like I'm the only one with this problem. All of my friends still have the games that they're obsessed with and play all the time. I personally don't enjoy most of those games since apparently I'm a boomer that hates games now. So what's the deal? Am I growing out of this hobby that I've loved for so long? Or perhaps I'm just jaded from the infestation of corporate.
That, or maybe you just like a certain type of game and that game hasn't, released like a big version of it. You know what I mean? Like if you're really into MOBAs, then obviously you have League of Legends. There's no need to like stop playing because they're constantly releasing new stuff for it.
Corporate greed and its insatiable hunger for infinite growth afflicted upon us at every corner, in every game, with cash shops and battle passes. So many.
Yeah, but that's not what made a lot of these games, like, at least to me, like it. That's not why I stopped playing Lost Ark. I don't give a damn if people want to spend money on it. Same with Smite. I played that for a little bit, but I didn't stop playing because you could. They didn't even have a battle pass from when I played. So
Battle passes and coins and the crystals you have to buy, and the crystals you don't get the right amount of crystals, and it doesn't make sense for all the items in the shop because they have.
I mean, if you're talking about freaking Lost Ark and Diablo Immortal, it's like,
You have a little left over because they want you to spend more money. Or maybe games are just bad now. Or is it some other nuanced collection of reasons that I'm going to spend the rest of this video exploring and talking about? Yeah, no, games are definitely just bad now. It was the early 90s. One of my earliest, most vivid memories of video games was the Christmas that I got a Super Nintendo. I got this Mickey Mouse game called The Magical Quest, starring Mickey Mouse. I remember just laying down in my living room for hours, playing on my little CRT TV. It was like crack to my tiny little underdeveloped brain, just seeing pixels moving at my command. I was hooked. And that was it. The floodgates were open. Throwing Foot Clan ninjas into the screen in Turtles of Time, collecting all the letters in Donkey Kong Country,
yeah.
Koopas
in Super Mario World, solving puzzles with all the cool items and the Link to the Past, that kick-ass
All
intro
solid
in Super
games.
Metroid. I was hyped and stressed out of my little
Really
mind
good
for
games.
that. This era was peak gaming and would forever solidify me as a Nintendo fanboy. But then, a few years later, the most fateful day of any kid growing up in the mid-90s, the Christmas where I got my... It was that sick-ass green one that was bundled with the Donkey
the
Kong
64.
and that little RAM pack. But now, games were 3D. Donkey Kong, Mario, Zelda all had an entirely new dimension to explore, opening up so many gameplay options. But that wasn't all, because you could play with 4 players. Mario Kart, Mario Party, Smash Bros.
Gauntlet.
The rise of party games. You could sit on the couch with your friends, smacking controllers out of each other's hands, accuse them of cheating, ruin friendships. It was great. But party
Screen
games weren't
checking.
the only thing
Yeah.
that benefited from the 4 controller slots.
At least with like Xbox, with like Halo. GoldenEye, wow.
multiplayer
That was pretty
first-person
good.
shooters. My friends and I spent countless hours on GoldenEye 64. We even
What was really cool with GoldenEye was like there was a lot of little secrets in almost every level.
used to get cardboard boxes and tape them up to the screen to section it off so that you couldn't screen look. We took that shit very seriously. Now, by this time, first-person shooters already existed on PC, but I had the crappiest Dell that was cheap and out of date even for the late 90s, though I was still able to play bangers like Roller Coaster Tycoon, Age of Empires 2, StarCraft. I knew the PC was eventually going to be where it's at for me. But for now, the next console era was upon us.
GameCube had like a really like that was probably one
I
of my
really
most
feel like
played
there was
consoles.
two games in particular that defined this generation for me personally. The first game was Smash Bros. There was so many more characters than the first game, so many more stages. It controlled beautifully. It was a masterpiece. One time my parents made us go play outside, and so we stuck the TV up against the window and threw the controllers out there, and so we were all just standing
What the
outside
heck?
playing Smash Bros through a window. And the second game was Time Splitters 2. From the same developers of GoldenEye, Time Splitters would become my favorite shooter to this day. The game had an insane amount of game modes, tons of characters, a map editor that you make your own story missions. It had it all. One of my friends was a genius when it came to making maps, and every time we got together, he had a couple new maps that had some interesting gimmick that completely changed the way we played the game. One of my favorite maps of his was one where it was just this square. It was like a grid of rooms with doors, and we would run around with one shot, one kill baseball bats. It was terrifying. If you've never played Time Splitters, I'm sorry, you're really missing out. The era of couch gaming would not last forever though, and in fact, it was soon coming to a close. Monday, March 15th, 2004.
RuneScape? I mean, honestly, I didn't even know about RuneScape for the longest of time. Which is funny because I did have a PC.
This was the day that I created my first RuneScape account. It would be my first introduction into the world of MMOs, the genre that encapsulated
And when I
everything
did
that I
find
loved
out about it, it looked like trash,
the
so I didn't
adventure,
even want to play
the
it.
immersion, puzzle solving, crafting, and I could play and enjoy it with my friends and hundreds of people across the world. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was loving every minute of it. Later that year, a certain other MMO would release, World of Warcraft. Unfortunately, there was one issue. I still
This
had
computer.
dial-up internet.
Oh, come on, you can play WoW on dial-up. The only thing you couldn't really do with dial-up was freaking AV, Arctic Valley. Oh my god, dial-up with AV was just so funny. The only thing I could do, I still remember this, was loot bodies so I can turn in the stuff to try to summon the ice elemental.
It'd be a few years until I got out of dial-up hell. So in the meantime, the only way I could play World of Warcraft was either by playing at friend's house or sneaking the installation onto the school computers in the library, which I absolutely did. They were not very well managed at the time. I wouldn't hit max level in World of Warcraft until the tail end of Burning Crusade just before Wrath. But by then, World of Warcraft was the game that I played, and it would remain that way for several years until about halfway through my senior year of high school. That's when I got beta access to StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty. My friends and I were so hyped for this game, we spent every day in school in our computer class just playing StarCraft 2. I fell in love with competitive gaming and esports because of StarCraft 2. It was the first game that I actually tried to play competitively and work my way up a ranked ladder. I would practice almost every day with friends, watch Day 9 and Husky videos, aspirations of going pro. I only ever made it to Plat, but getting to Plat felt incredible. I remember my friend and I used to wake up at like 5 in the morning to watch the GSL. And in 2011, as a broke college student,
I had no interest in RTS like PvP, like against other players, like unless they're friends and we're just having fun. But I never like cared about like the competitive side of RTSs.
in Orlando, Florida,
Just
I
have
bought a
fun with
ticket to
them.
MLG using a literal bag of coins. But it was such an incredible experience. My friends and I got to meet all of our favorite players, Huck, In Control. We also got to meet Day 9, Husky, Artosis, and Tasteless. It would be my very first, and unfortunately, my very last live gaming event. And eventually, StarCraft
Why?
2 would give way to League of Legends, which a few years later gave way to Smite, which would be the last competitive esport game that I played seriously. None of them really
That's weird. I mean, Why'd you end that Smite? You would think you'd play like I don't know, Overwatch, I don't know, that or go back to StarCraft 2. Like sounds like you're really into RTSs.
It grabbed me in the same way that StarCraft 2 did, and I'm not sure any other competitive esport ever will.
Well, yeah, because RTSs are unfortunately a dying genre.
This was about the peak of gaming in my life. The best of it all came before, and I feel like I can pinpoint the exact year that the steep slope downward began, and that year was 2014. This was the year that StarCraft was all but dead, the year Warlords of Draenor came out, the first ever World of Warcraft expansion that I did not buy or play. This was the year Destiny released and was a massive disappointment. This was the year that Smite introduced loot boxes.
Destiny was really good until you could like realize there wasn't much content at the end game.
This was the year that WildStar released and failed. And every year on.
To be fair, I think WildStar was actually a really fun game. I just think it was just too hard for the casual player base.
On from this point, just seemed to be one big disappointment after another. It felt more and more common for games to release unfinished or broken or have some predatory monetization. Every year seemed worse than the last. Gaming seemed different now.
I mean, you show Overwatch, but Overwatch wasn't really that bad with that. It didn't feel like it to me. I never felt like I had to spend money to have fun with Overwatch. If you want to do all the collectibles, then sure, I guess, but like just to play the game. Monetizations. Obviously they have.
The gaming industry has grown incredibly fast since I first picked up a controller. In fact, in 2021, the games industry raked in more cash than music and film combined. A good bit of this growth can be attributed to the rise of mobile gaming, which in 2021 made up 45% of the total revenue in the industry. And of course, the stench of this heaping pile of cash would not go unnoticed by the insectoid swarm of C-suite executives, and with their grubby little shit-stained appendages and their dungest touch, they've pushed hard to make console and PC gaming monetization more closely resemble that of a mobile game, attempting to normalize all the same underhanded tactics which apply psychological manipulation in various ways to pry as much money as they can out of its users in a predatory manner. Whether it's feeding off of players' addictions by implementing gambling adjacent mechanics, or their frustration by creating problems and selling back the solutions, or FOMO with limited time, buy now expensive skins. The online nature of the live service model has primed games for these sort of exploitations. It's not completely without its pushback though, as we gamers have been successful in combating some of these changes, as is the case with loot boxes, as we've pretty much eradicated those from most PC and console games at this point. Though it definitely seems like a losing battle, as every year more ground gives way to the normalization of such strategies, in like a 1 step forward, 10 step back kind of way. For example, if we look back, it wasn't that long ago when DLC was considered outrageous. It was seen as devs taking content out of the original game and holding it back to sell later. But
I remember around that time, like the big issue was that it was content in the CD, like there, but you had to pay more to unlock it. So I don't really agree with that too much. And I think for most people, like honestly, this was always going to happen. It happens with everything. So
as always, the ground gave way, and the conversation shifted to whether or not it was day one DLC, or how much effort they put into the DLC, if the content was worth it. Fast forward to today, where similar conversations are being had about the pay-to-win debate, where at first any pay-to-win is completely unacceptable, to now being able to find conversations about how a certain game is not that pay-to-win.
Well, the reason why the debate's even coming into play is because the games are good. Like pay to win on a crappy game, like no one's going to stand behind it. Pay to win on a really good game, like for example Lost Ark, people are more okay with it because it's a good game. But at the same time, like you don't have to play them. There's a lot of other games that don't have pay to win, or at least not like really pay to win, that you can play. Especially games you pay for. Like it's common for free-to-play games to be more pay-to-win, but then, in a sense, it does make sense in a way, so.
But complaining about monetization in games is nothing new or original. In fact, it's an oversaturated market, and at this point, just feels like beating a dead horse. It seems you'll never get enough people to care about this topic, and until that happens...
Of course you won't, because it doesn't matter to most people. Non-competitive games, why should they care if it's like pay to win?
Nothing will change.
Now you put pay to win in a game like Call of Duty, Overwatch, like that kind of stuff, then that's different. League of Legends, like if it introduced pay to win games, that game would die in a year.
Instead, I'd like to talk about a bit of a hot take
Maybe not die, but I would almost guarantee it would lose at least half its player base.
here that in the past 10 years, gaming really hasn't changed much at all. The gaming industry feels pretty stagnant. If I compare games as they are now to how I thought they would be by now as a kid,
What's wrong with
the
that
picture's
guy's
very
mouth?
disappointing. As a kid who just discovered MMOs like RuneScape and World of Warcraft, I was blown away by the idea of what MMOs could be in the future. I would hop off World of Warcraft and go play Dungeons & Dragons and think, man, one day World of Warcraft is going to have the same level of choice and consequence that I can have with my imagination playing D&D. Now,
Are you like who had thought this? I definitely didn't. I knew about Dungeons and Dragons. I didn't really play it, but I think that's like kind of dumb. Like what to have that level of choice like in an MMO when RPGs aren't even able to give you that.
obviously,
Some RPGs are closer to it, I guess, like what like the wow, Divinity games. But even then it's not even close to Dungeons and Dragons because there are literally no rules. It'd be like having a game developer, like having your own personal game developer who can make on the fly changes while you're playing. You can't do that in normal games like you can in D&D.
that hasn't happened yet. And as a kid, I didn't know anything.
It's not going to happen. The only way that's ever going to happen is if they somehow make AI able to directly make changes on the fly. So we're probably decades away from something like that.
About game development. But I've heard a similar observation from Rasputin in his video series Gaming for a Non-Gamer, which is a great series and I recommend you check it out, where he discusses his wife's disappointment discovering video games for the first time.
Her expectations for what she thought she could do in each game were always different than the reality, and I think as she realized that games were more simple than she had first assumed, some of the intrigue about them faded.
There's a massive lack of innovation.
Then have her play something that does have that, like Valheim, what a Minecraft, like those kind of games where it's like very freeing in what you can do. It's super non-linear, like there's no real story to them. Well, Valheim, yeah, but Ark Survival. I mean, trying to think like I know there's other games, so it's like if that's what she said she was looking for, and then you introduce her to a game like Doom, like dude, what the heck?
And risk taking in the AAA
That'd be like if you had or Sims. Like Sims is a good one for that kind of stuff.
space. As we see games like Skyrim being released a billion times, The Last of Us is getting its third version of the game, Call of Duty ran out of ideas and decided to just loop back around and start re-releasing their games in order again, hoping nobody would notice, but they somehow made all the games worse so everyone noticed. Which brings me to my next point, where not only are companies not really interested in innovating at all,
Of course they noticed. Like it's a part of their campaign is they're re-releasing it. Everyone knows. The fact that they make it worse, it's like the crazy part.
but they seem to be actively taking step backwards in innovation. If you look at something like the original Fallout's super in-depth dialogue system versus Fallout 4's dialogue system, it's a huge step back. And that's a tame example. It gets so much worse. Blizzard, for example, figured out that they can retroactively ruin a 20-year-old game with Warcraft 3 Reforged. Well, I guess that was pretty innovative. The only real innovations coming out of this industry are coming from indie developers and modders, the latter of which is responsible for the two biggest genres.
I don't think so. Final Fantasy 14 has been innovating a lot of things. Not like a ton of things, but like the whole one character can be every class. Crafting is its own job. And I think there's like I don't know if other games have done it, but I doubt they've done it as well. So it's like I think you're just cherry picking like the bad things from AAA games and really focusing on them, which I understand that's like a human thing where you get, 99 positive things, one bad thing, and you focus on the bad thing. So, but I think you need to reflect more on the positives that AAAs have introduced. I'm not saying AAA games is better than indie. I think indie games have to be innovative because they can't fall back on graphics. They can't fall back on like, well, maybe gameplay a little, but Like they can't really do that the way AAA games like God of War. Like most of the appeal to the game is the visuals.
In the past decade, and that's without even the expectation of getting paid. Isn't that weird? Kind of goes against the conventional capitalist thinking, huh? Looking at the trajectory of the industry, it's really hard to not just be depressed about it all and wonder if the industry
Why?
can ever course correct.
Dude, there's games like Elden Ring, like, and say what you want about Genshin Impact having like gotchas, which like you don't have to get involved in it to have fun with the game. I beat Genshin Impact, or up to when I played it. There was nothing else for me to do other than the gotcha stuff, so that's why I stopped playing. Because I don't really care about that.
It's weird to think that things like YouTube, Reddit, and all these other social media sites haven't really been around that long. And yet it's sometimes hard to remember what it was like before they existed.
YouTube's been
These
around
sites
for a
have
while
made
now.
data mining, crowdsourced information, and video guides all accessible to everyone
Google.
at all times. In some cases, the internet will have every bit of information about every mechanic and secret in a given game before they even release. And all of these things have drastically changed how we play video games.
No. Most people don't look up video game info. That's the honest truth, man.
Let's take a look at a game like World of Warcraft. If I had to describe how I feel playing retail WoW in one word, it would be emptiness. Not because of a lack of content necessarily, so much as the game just kind of feels soulless.
No, the game feels soulless. It doesn't feel soulless, it just feels like shit. Shadowlands was a garbage expansion. Almost across the board.
Where before, the game was about adventure and discovery, it is instead now a game about optimization. It's essentially a solved game where add-ons and logs have optimized game.
If you get involved in it, you don't have to do any of that stuff. Like, that's one thing I really don't like when people talk about it. It's like, oh yeah, you can look up these things. It's like, you don't have to. No one is sitting over you typing these things with like in front of you and forcing you to look at it. Like, I'll be honest, I don't really look at this kind of stuff. I just play the game, and then once I am ready to do, like, for example, I'm like trying to do arena or the solo queue arena just to have fun with it. So I'll just look up maybe a video on like what specs are doing well in arena. And that's about as far as I go. And that's from someone who games like a lot, but I'm also kind of casual now. But at the same time, like, there's way more people doing solo queue than people looking up those videos.
Gameplay to a T with little room for experimentation or creativity.
Like maybe 20%.
Which is fine. I mean, no one likes to play suboptimally. I'm not trying to vilify optimization, as it can be quite fun for some people. Take speedrunning, for example. Speedrunning is such an interesting hobby to me. It's something I've always wanted to get into, but I've always felt a little intimidated by. The stuff that people are able to achieve with speedrunning is truly mind-blowing. Some of which is only really possible because of the interconnected nature of modern gaming, where sharing glitches and exploits is part of the fun of collectively iterating on runs to shave off more and more time. But then if you look at something like RuneScape, one of the most solved games that has become literally all about the optimization, you'll find a community who's made it a tradition of coming up with off-the-wall challenges and restrictions inflicted upon their accounts, also known as snowflake accounts, so that they are forced to forge their own path. There's no guide to follow on how to clear one of the hardest raids in old school RuneScape if you're not allowed to leave the swamp zone. But one man, after 3 years of theory crafting, grinding, and 33 very entertaining YouTube videos, was able to accomplish that goal, with hundreds and thousands of people watching and loving it. So clearly, the problem for World of Warcraft isn't just optimization itself. It's that optimization isn't just confined to the few who enjoy it, but instead sort of forced onto everyone else. With all these tools available,
that is the case, and why WoW rating has gone really downhill, is that it feels like you need mods, you need to look up the fights, because a lot of groups will just kick you.
To everyone, and things
like Final Fantasy, they're not really like this. A lot of times they'll just teach you the fight then and there if you're new. You don't have to look it up, or you'll see someone whisper you like, "Hey, you're supposed to step out of that," or when this turns whatever color, like you want to move here.
Things like Raider.io assigning public completion scores, everyone is expected to be fully optimized or not play the game. Because again, no one likes to play suboptimally. Ignorance truly is bliss. It's my opinion that this is the real reason why World of Warcraft has been struggling. Like Asmongold has said, Blizzard has ignored the casual audience and failed to produce fun and compelling
A
activities
lot of
that
people
aren't
said
just
it.
about the
Yeah.
optimization. Instead, they just continue to double down on the raids and dungeons, catering to this nature of gameplay. Now, as of this recording, Dragonflight has not released yet, so maybe that will be the expansion that fixes this issue. But it's not just retail. A lot of players were excited about Classic and logged in expecting to recapture that nostalgic sense of adventure.
They're kind of dumb.
But things are too
thinking
different
that.
now. The way we play games is too different now. The game didn't seem nearly as hard as they remembered, the world not as vast. But I think it comes down to the fact that every facet of the game has been solved already, and that the joy of the original release lied in the discovery and the journey. Now, this is not everyone's opinion. There's still plenty of people that very much enjoyed Classic. This is mostly just anecdotal sentiment from me and my friends. But I do think that this might be
Yeah, I was gonna say, I have a lot of friends who actually really like Classic. so-
why so many people get excited whenever a new MMO is released. It's a chance to discover things for the first time.
I mean, there is that, but it's also like, could this be my new home in a way? Like, a lot of people had that MMO that was their game. You know what I mean? Um, and they want to see if maybe this game will be it. So,
To not be beholden to the methods and builds
because I think this argument of exploring something new, you could use that on any game, any RPG, I would say.
that someone else already figured out and everyone is expected to use. A chance for you to be the one that discovers those methods. But, for better or for worse, this is just the way the world is now. Maybe someday a game will come out that is immune to this phenomenon. A game that can't be solved, where the discovery never goes away.
The only way you're gonna have that, dude, is if you have randomly generated everything, which actually Wayfinder seems to kind of be looking towards that, if I remember right. So keep an eye on that. See if Wayfinder's your thing. Sounds like it. If you want everything to always be new,
Doesn't seem possible,
doesn't mean it will always be good.
but who knows? Maybe someday.
Jeez, still more. Why are you making this all serious, dude? Of all the ones you've listed, this one should be the most obvious. You were a freaking child, and now you're a grown man, or grown person, adult, whatever. If you're, it doesn't matter what gender it is. I don't know why I said man, but you're a grown person. You're an adult now, so obviously most things about you have changed. I don't know anyone who, well, that's not true. The few people I know who are who haven't really changed much since they're kids aren't really people you want to hang around with. You know what I mean? They throw tantrums, they're freaking childish, they're petty. So it's I hope you have changed. Damn, dude. If you haven't, that's really sad. So it's this is the most obvious. I want to see what he says,
I
but
don't
it's
feel like a different person. I feel
What?
like I always have been and always will be me. But I've changed my mind and opinions on a lot of things in the past 10 years. Growing up and dealing with adult responsibilities can be really stressful. You're faced with a lot of change and uncertainty, and it can be really easy to succumb to worry and regret.
I mean, that was a dumb thing. I've always felt on me. Who the hell are you gonna feel like, James Bond? Of course you feel like you.
But worry and regret are just a waste of time. Time that could be better spent having fun. You know, people say video games are a waste of time, but personally, I think that having fun and enjoying your life
Almost anything can be seen as a waste of time. It determines on what your priorities are. If you believe entertainment is a waste of time, literally you can throw most books, all movies, all television, all games as technically waste of time. Even though, even in that scenario where you think entertainment's a waste of time, there's a lot of learning you can do from media. Doesn't matter if it's books or whatever. So it's still not technically a waste of time, but it just that's how it is. There are some people who are all about just making money, all about working out, going outside, hiking, whatever it is, I would see games as a waste of time. Me, I see people who go out hiking all the time, like that's kind of a waste of time. It's just a bunch of rocks. You know, there's no like pot of gold you're out hunting. So physically for exercise though, I mean it's the same thing. Like you can still get things out of it. So it's not a complete waste of time. But yeah.
Life is the best way to spend your time. But what do you do if you no longer enjoy your favorite hobby? With this fog hanging over my head, I began reminiscing on how I used to enjoy games. I used to spend countless hours grinding the ladder in StarCraft 2, working on refining builds, seeing small improvements over time, making quantifiable progress in a skill feels so good. Ah, the dopamine. But today, if you asked me to play just about any competitive game, I could not be fucking bothered. I haven't played League of Legends in like 9 years.
With the Star Wars one, are you sure it's not just a case where you really, really like Star Wars? Did I really say Star Wars? StarCraft. Where it's just your perfect game. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really get competitive in games unless I really like them. League of Legends, I got competitive for a bit. Warcraft, I really did try to get competitive in vanilla. But, like, outside of that, I'm not really a competitive person to begin with. So it's like, that's not even completely true because it's like, I've played most fighting games growing up. Soul Calibur, Tekken, Dead or Alive, Street Fighter, like almost anyone you can name, I've probably played it. Same with shooter games, but it's not like for me anymore. So,
But I booted it up a couple of months ago. My friends were telling me about all the new champions and the new metas and the new builds, and I just wanted to go take a nap. Is it because my attention span is shot? Is the lack of elasticity in my rotting brain protesting
just
against
don't
me
like the
trying to
game.
shove even more useless shit into it? Maybe both. I used to have the drive to spend hours learning everything I could about a new game. There were times where all I could think about was whatever game I was currently playing, thinking about what I wanted to accomplish next, how I was going to do it, and I wouldn't stop until I finished. Nowadays, I'd be lucky to stick with the game for more than a couple weeks before I'm over it, regardless of if I actually finished it or not. So then, are there any games that I do enjoy? After so many disappointing letdowns and trying to enjoy games that just start to annoy me after 2 weeks, this question legitimately crossed my mind. And at the peak of my jadedness, one game proved to me that I did still indeed have the capacity to fall in love with the game. And that game was Valheim. A game that isn't even finished yet, but a game that so perfectly created a sense of adventure and discovery that it reminded me why I love gaming to begin with. So it seems there may still be remnants of a gamer deep underneath all the jadedness. I've proven to myself that I definitely
I mean, it's just like I said, like you just haven't found the game for you. Sounds like Valheim. Like imagine, like for a second, Valheim went MMO. Like they did like a super overhaul of their netcode to where you can play with a bunch of people in a shared open world. You'd be into MMOs again. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just you're waiting on a game for you.
haven't outgrown
There's
the
nothing
hobby.
wrong with that.
Maybe I've just been playing the wrong games. And sure, the world is different, and the way we play games is different, but they're still fun to be had. And despite the industry's best efforts to cannibalize itself, there will always be passionate indie developers and modders to pick up the slack and make good games and experiences. And maybe that's enough. Well, it kind of has to be enough. But I'm determined to rekindle my love of gaming. And that will be my New Year's resolution. I will begin my search to find the fun.
Yeah, just try games until you find one that's good, or at least that you find good. Wonder if he played Elden Ring.